let's talk about lesser known but still great titles that are worth playing. This time we're diving into the era of the 2020s. And honestly, pulling together this list for this decade turned out to be a real challenge. Most people, in one way or another, have already heard something about newer games. Everyone uses their social media, reading news, following newer games, so surprising viewers, not that easy. If we're talking about the 2020s as an era, in my opinion, it's both the best and the worst time for video games. The industry has fully commercialized, and it became especially obvious during the pandemic. Out of sheer boredom, people who had never even touched a controller before suddenly started playing. On one hand, this was a massive opportunity for developers. A lot of people came to the show. On the other hand, it gave corporations even more freedom to monetize aggressively and chase bigger profits. One of the advantages of the 90s and 2000s was the gaming still felt like a niche hobby. Statistically, not that many people played games, at least not consistently. Developers were enthusiasts. They understood players because they were players. You often felt a personal connection to the creators through their games. But in the last few years, development has increasingly turned into numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. Video games started morphing into products first and art second, sometimes feeling like a simple cash grab. And yet, despite corporate pressure, 2024 and 2025 gave us so many great games that calling it anything less than a miracle would be an understatement. Indie games, big budget titles, strong sequels, meaningful remasters. Maybe it's the global mainstream popularity of gaming now. Maybe it's just better accessibility of development tools. Whatever the reason, talking about the 2020s in terms of cool but unknown titles is tough. As always, this list is in no particular order. No favorites, no bad picks. Let's roll. And let's start with one of the best games I've personally ever played. Deep Rock Galactic. The core ideas behind this title were sitting right there on the surface for years. It still amazes me that it took this long for someone to bring them together properly. If you had to describe it in one sentence, people would call it Minecraft with guns, but in reality, it's a session-based cooperative PvE shooter with the class system. On paper, this combination sounds not that great. It shouldn't work, and yet somehow it works so naturally, so organically, so cleanly that once you start playing, it's become really addictive. The game is relatively well known, but an average online of around 15,000 players isn't exactly what you'd call massive popularity. For those unfamiliar, what do we actually have here? You play as space dwarfs. They work for a mining corporation. Every mission begins with your team dropping into an asteroid to complete specific objectives. That might mean gathering resources, collecting rare crystals, hunting alien eggs, or eliminating bosses. During those missions, you're constantly fighting off alien bugs and sometimes rival corporation robots. The game features 4 distinct classes: Scout, Engineer, Gunner, and Driller. Each one has unique weapons and tools. The Scout moves quickly across terrain, the Engineer sets up defensive support, and so on. And here's the magic. The class design is insanely well integrated. You know how it usually goes. A game has multiple classes, but everyone ends up playing 1 or 2 meta picks because it's easier. In Deep Rock, it's the opposite. A full team of 4 different classes creates a perfectly balanced dwarven force, which complements each other. But the real star of this show, the environment. It's fully destructible. You can dig, drill, blast through terrain. Combined with slightly cubic visual style, comparisons to Minecraft are obvious. And its monetization model, surprisingly honest. Deep Rock doesn't squeeze money out of you. The overwhelming majority of cosmetics are earned purely through gameplay. There are only a few optional cosmetic DLC packs if you want to support the developers. The game still receives occasional free updates, though as an older title now, its biggest issue is that the creators have moved on. They made a board game adaptation and then they started developing other projects. Not long ago, they even released a roguelike spin-off game. As a small indie studio, they've spread their efforts across multiple projects. Naturally, the main game has suffered a bit in terms of content volume. Updates are kinda rare. Even so, Deep Rock Galactic was, is and will remain one of my all-time favorite cooperative experiences. I personally place it on the same shelf as Left 4 Dead. If you haven't tried it yet, I really recommend giving it a shot. And oh, almost forgot.
For Rockin' Stone! Rockin' Stone, brother! Carl!
Next game on the list is another action title, Earth Defense Force 6, simply known as EDF. The series itself is pretty old. The very first Earth Defense Force came out back in 2003. Since then we've had multiple mainline sequels and a handful of spin-offs. Some people like to call EDF Helldivers on a budget, but in reality it's the game Helldivers always desired to be. One time I've tried the fourth title and have been continuously playing the next entries ever since. So in the context of this video, we'll talk about the newest one, the sixth game in the series. The concept of EDF is pretty simple. You get a set of story missions, each with multiple difficulty levels, and in these missions you complete objectives, which usually means shooting everything on the map and farming loot crates. There are several types. Green crates that give you new weapons, red crates increasing your maximum health, and of course you pick up medkits to stay alive. Traditionally, EDF features 4 classes. Ranger, your standard infantry. Wing diver, a lady in a high-tech energy suit that lets her fly. Fencer, heavy exoskeleton suit. And a raider, essentially a support guy who can call in everything from artillery strikes to orbital cannons. In the early games, the enemies were mostly giant insects. Over time, they've added aliens, robots, androids, and all sorts of other things. The funniest part, how absurd it looks when you fire a huge cannon at a giant spider and then watch it ragdoll. If you get the vibe, EDF becomes one of the most fun games you'll ever play. And here's the paradox. Traditional Japanese game design both makes EDF better and worse at the same time. On the negative side, in true Japanese fashion, the game has a comically bad UI, a completely over-the-top anime-style story, filled with cursed dialogues, ridiculous grind, and logic that sometimes just doesn't exist. On the positive side, it gives you freedom. Where Helldivers would restrict you, EDF just spreads its wings. A building blocks your line of fire on a boss? Blow it up. Think you need balanced team composition with different classes? No one cares. Pick the same class and call orbital support just for giggles. It's hard to talk about builds in a traditional sense, but the equipment variety is massive, if you're willing to spend a lot of time farming for it. And that's probably the biggest downside. EDF requires you to replay the same missions multiple times across different difficulties. It's not the most engaging loop in the world, and some players use mods to make it easier. That said, the co-op is fantastic. On Steam or PlayStation you'll usually find plenty of random players to run through the campaign with. Next we move on to Solasta, Crown of the Magister, essentially a lower budget cousin of Baldur's Gate 3. It's a surprisingly solid custom-made turn-based RPG from the indie scene. Why custom? Because in this game, player choice matters significantly more than in many big budget RPGs. You get several official campaigns to choose from, each with its own story, but the gameplay itself follows Dungeons & Dragons rules almost phonetically. The same level can play out completely different ways depending on your party composition, your skill proficiencies, and of course your dice rolls. If we're talking about the vibe, Solasta reminds me more of Neverwinter Nights 2, with all its expansions. We've got the global map, you've got that classic, almost old-school D&D atmosphere, which is a great thing. One of the standout features is character creation. Languages actually matter here, and there are quite a few of them. Personality traits matter too. Greed, altruism, unlike the classic chaotic good alignment in many D&D video games, which often changes almost nothing. Here, on the other hand, personality really influences gameplay. Each party member responds based on their traits. You're basically at the mercy of your own characters. Otherwise, it's what you expect. Explore, fight, talk, level up. And if official campaigns aren't enough, you can download community-made stories directly from Steam. Another interesting aspect, Solasta is both linear and branching at the same time. For comparison, Baldur's Gate 3 is relatively structured. Yes, there are major decision points, but after several playthroughs, you'll see almost all variations. Solasta leans more into controlled randomization. You'll revisit the same locations and objectives in campaigns, but their development can differ dramatically, to a certain extent of course. The best comparison I can make is this. Solasta feels like a proper video game incarnation of tabletop D&D. I've played several digitalized tabletop adaptations using D&D rules, and honestly, many of them aren't that fun mechanically. Solasta, on the other hand, among modern turn-based RPGs, come closest to capturing the feeling of classic D&D, without turning it into a boring dice-throwing simulator. Mechanically, it's a traditional party-based RPG, and for enthusiasts, it's not an easy one. When I played co-op with friends, I was dying fairly often without advice from a buddy who actually understands tabletop D&D. Speaking of co-op, it's excellent. Polished, clean, and it's nice that Solasta's structure prevents players from scattering everywhere. The open world exists only on the global map. The actual gameplay happens in contained levels. Now the downsides. Of course, the budget. You can immediately tell that animations suffered, especially facial ones. The voice acting is also limited. The overall indie feel is very noticeable, but none of that prevents the game from being one of the best modern turn-based RPGs that you'll ever play. If you love D&D, this is a must-have. At the time of this video's release, a sequel is already in development. Maybe it will smooth out the few rough edges the first game has. This might sound strange, but even though I'm recommending the next game, I don't actually like it. And it all comes down to one specific gameplay decision. I'm talking about Ghostrunner, the one that Epic Games gave away for free a couple of times. I'm pretty sure a lot of people owns it, but never actually launched it. So what do we have here? It's a cyberpunk action game with an interesting story and distinct gameplay. On the surface, Ghostrunner looks like a pure action title. In reality, it's more of an interactive puzzle. Something like Katana Zero and Hotline Miami, where the games are meant to be completed the way the developers designed them. Personally, that approach doesn't really click with me. I prefer when games hand me a toolbox of mechanics and let me experiment freely within the environment. But my preferences don't invalidate anyone else's. So what's Ghostrunner about? At its core, it's an action platformer set inside a massive tower. Most of your time is spent moving. Wall running, jumping, climbing, at the same time you're fighting enemies. You get a handful of abilities and a simple upgrade system that helps make your life a bit easier. The problem? The developers designed only a few viable paths through encounters. Both the environment and enemies are merciless. One mistake, back to the checkpoint. Sometimes you have to run and eliminate enemies in a specific order, exactly the way the game demands. There's very little real variation, and it can be tiresome at times. To give you an idea, I never actually beat the final boss. I quit and watched the ending on YouTube. The game drained me completely, and yet, despite my frustration, I still recommend it. Because the movement is insanely fluid. I can confidently put Ghostrunner on the same level as the best first-person parkour titles out there. The visuals are slick, and the main thing, the story is excellent. Cyberpunk as a setting is extremely popular, but it often fails to deliver fresh narratives. Usually it's the same tropes, the same themes, recycled again and again. Ghostrunner, however, offers a really unique variation. The story is the reason I kept pushing forward. If you like Katana Zero, Hotline Miami, or you just want first-person parkour platforming, this is absolutely a must-have. For everyone else, I'd still recommend it for the setting and story alone. There's also a sequel, Ghostrunner 2, but I haven't had time to play it yet. If you've beaten it, drop your impressions in the comments. Now let's talk about something truly indie. Selaco started capturing the hearts of boomer shooter fans even during early development, when the team was posting concepts on social media. Beyond cool ideas, the developers really understand how to make a great FPS game. If I had to describe Selaco briefly, it's a modern reinterpretation of the ideas from Fear, combined with free-form level navigation and modern FPS ideas. And here's the craziest part. It's built on Jay-Z Doom, essentially a heavily modified engine that was used by original Doom. As you can imagine, this software comes with tons of limitations, but Selaco uses it so brilliantly that you might not even notice at first. The game is insanely interactive. Windows shatter, objects have physics, you can pick up items. There is also advanced lighting, advanced in quotation marks, considering the engine. From a technical side alone, Selaco is impressive. But technical tricks mean nothing if the gameplay doesn't hold up. Gameplay splits between combat and exploration. You wake up, someone's trying to kill you, you grab a rifle and start fighting back. And it becomes immediately clear. The game will not go easy on you. Every fight could be your last. Just like in Fear, levels are built to allow enemies to flank you from multiple angles. And they absolutely will. They use smoke, shields, different weapon types, all the typical elements. But you're not static either. Our protagonist moves fast, slides, climbs. You can approach combat methodically, holding positions or play dynamically and aggressively. It's up to you. The environment adapts to your ideas. There is an explosive barrel there, a breakable wall here, a window you can slip through for a flank. I replayed certain sections multiple times and firefights went differently each time. Levels are technically linear, point A to point B, but they are often wide and open within that path. And the number of secrets is really impressive, dozens per level. And they're not just ammo caches. They reward you with upgrade resources, money, health increases. You'll want those upgrades too. There's a huge arsenal, plus different fire modes. They even included a nail gun, the similar we had in Fear. The shooting feels fantastic. You feel every shot. Sometimes I even wished for more combat just to watch the animations and feel the atmosphere. And again, all of this running on Jay-Z Doom. While Selaco's levels are linear, you can revisit them. At some point, you unlock a monorail system that lets you travel between locations. Missed a secret, you can go back. The sheer scope of this boomer shooter really surprised me. I played a few hours on Steam Deck, then decided it deserved a full PC session. My complete playthrough with secret hunting took almost 18 hours. And the game isn't even finished yet. They're still working on the second chapter. For players like me, there's also a separate randomized mode. Enemy placements, weapon drops, rarity, gameplay modifiers. I have to admit, Selaco is one of the best modern representatives of the genre. Highly recommended. So that's my relatively short list of 2020's games I recommend checking out. Fewer titles this time, but I went deeper into each one. The biggest challenge while making this video was avoiding falling entirely for indie titles. I tried to find something balanced, so everyone could find something interesting. At the same time, since this is the most recent era, I'm curious how my logic resonates with viewers.